and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. One thing I came across today was something about Libya and talking about the revolution and all that. I put out an article questioning what the war on Libya was, if it was for water, because when I was looking at it, one of the first things that the United Nations did was take out the man-made river that was supplying the water to the farmers to supply the food for the nation, which seemed to be a pretty good target if you want to control a water supply. Sorry there. But when you look at it, you know, there's a lot more that happened in Libya, definitely after the whole Benghazi incident, that even if this was some type of war for water or war for oil or to stop Gaddafi, to, you know, actually have a real revolution, what it becomes after the initial revolution is pretty evident from what happened at Benghazi and a lot of the other stuff going on there. Matthew Millen, he was a I can't even speak today. He's a documentarian, and he went to Libya during the revolution and was there after, and he witnessed the aftermath of the revolution firsthand, and he was looking for he wanted to do something about the musical soul and the music movement that was happening during the revolution, and planned on having a festival and got to know many of the artists there. And, well, what happened to Libya after the actual revolution, you'll get to hear in his words. But again, Adam Kokesh interviewed him, and he titled, "What Really Happened in Libya?" So I'm going to cue this up here. And then after this, we will discuss Libya a little bit more, and then we'll get into some of the current news. And he kind of touched on the Israel-Palestine type conflict a little bit at the beginning of this clip, so we'll get into that too.
My background is actually physics, believe it or not. I was an engineer for years, but I decided to go into filmmaking about 10 years ago because, I mean, honestly, engineering wasn't doing it for me. So for years I actually did, like substitute teaching and stuff like that to supplement my filmmaking, but I was very good friends with a Libyan guy who lived in Los Angeles, and when the revolution broke out, he had been estranged. He was a refugee from Libya for 36 years. And that when the revolution broke out, he saw it as his chance to go back, and he never thought he'd see Gaddafi, the Gaddafi regime fall. He thought it would just be a dynasty handed down from, to his son Saif, and then to his grandson and so on. So he decided to go right after the Katiba, the big fortress, fell in Benghazi, which was February 20th, 2011, and he asked me to go with him. And, my first reaction was, well, why the hell would I want to go in the middle of a revolution? But, I'm a documentary filmmaker, and
you're like,
very...
duh, good footage.
Yeah. Well, I was very worried, obviously, at first. I have no experience with revolutions. But I just decided that, this was a big chance to really document the revolution, because the media narrative always bothered me. It comes from a very Orientalist perspective, whether you're on the left side, the left wing, or the right wing. The right wing seen as, Arabs are all Muslim terrorists. And then you have the left wing who thinks, well, these people can't do anything themselves. It's always Western imperialism that's behind everything.
Well, can you explain your use of the term Orientalist there?
Classic Orientalism is like Rudyard Kipling. You have like the noble savage, or right. We're here to civilize them. We're here to give them, they're obviously barbarians, and we're doing them a favor by colonizing them.
Okay,
that's kind of the Orientalist. The classic 19th century Orientalism, which has manifested differently in the 20th and 21st centuries, but it's still there.
Absolutely.
You're seeing that in Israel right now, with the rampant racism in that country, for instance. And
it's the worst kind of racism. It's something else of the understanding in Zionism is that a Jewish soul is worth more than any other human soul, in the same way that the average human soul is worth more than the soul of a cow.
Well, yes, and I mean, the very origins, particularly of revisionist Zionism, is in fascism. Abraham Stern, the leader of Lehi, the Stern Gang, he actually contacted the Germans, and he tried to make a pact with them for them to send the Jews to Israel, and he would fight their fight against the British. I mean, this was before he knew about the final solution. This was 1940, but still, he saw the ideologies in a way. He even said that we share the same totalitarian beliefs. And, I mean, there's a lot of different types of Zionism, but that's revisionist Zionism that you see the current leadership in Israel really have embraced.
So how did you end up going to Libya then?
Well, my friend asked me to go with him, and he left in late February, early March. And I did some soul searching at first, and then I went to my brother's bachelor party in Vegas, and I looked around and just said, there's got to be something more than this. So right there, I decided to go, and this was at the time where the no-fly zone was just announced, and Benghazi was surrounded by Gaddafi's forces, so I was thinking, how the hell am I going to get in? But then the airstrikes happened. I raised what little money I had, and I just took off, and next thing I knew, I was crossing the border into Libya.
Oh, so where did you fly into?
I flew first into Cairo, and then my friend Hamuda, my friend that lived in L.A., he met me in Cairo, and one of his Libyan buddies drove us to Benghazi. which is about a 15-hour drive.
Do you have any problems crossing borders?
No, it was actually frighteningly easy to get. They were waving everybody in because anybody with a camera, they wanted everybody to see what Gaddafi had done to the country. And the level of enthusiasm in those early days was just something I had never seen in my life. I mean, 3 a.m, you see kids sweeping the street. I remember going into Tobruk, which is the biggest city in the very east. Mm-hmm. It's right next to the border. And at 3 a.m, seeing kids out sweeping the streets, cleaning up all the rubble, painting on the old internal security office building. And that's when I was amazed. It was just it was like a 100% exercising of citizenship. Those first days, what I saw. And it was really just a profound experience. And then when I got to Benghazi, everybody else was going to the front line, which was my plan at first. I mean, I spent a little time in the front line, but the real story was not there. It was in a music explosion that was happening in the heart of Benghazi at this media center that was just made right after the Katiba, the fortress, fell. So around February 20th. And the music was unbelievable. It was staggering. I mean, there was heavy metal, hip-hop, country, R&B, every type of music you can imagine. And it was just, and Libya's kind of a great abyss to us, you know what I mean? There's very little we know about it. What I knew about it was from my friend Hamuda growing up, but also I knew about the famous Roman ruins and, and Leptis Magna and Sabrata and stuff like that. But there was very little we knew about it, so... And maybe I should have expected a music revolution to happen, but it just caught me completely off guard to see this just explosion in music. And it felt like this is what music was, if that makes sense. It was its basic, most fundamental level. No record contracts. One guy, I remember he was playing his music for me, and I say, what, are you going to try to sell the music? He's like, why would we sell the music? This is a revolution. And that hit me so hard. It was just none of the record contracts, none of the music to market a brand, which is so commonplace now. And it just, I saw the story right away was this. This was much more interesting. So we spent the next several months, I befriended all the musicians in Benghazi. It was a very tight-knit core group who was kind of, they were the epicenter. It was all stemming from them. And we decided to start a music festival. And we had planned for months and months. And then the greatest thing happened and the worst thing happened. The greatest thing happened was that the revolution ended, but that's also what killed any chance for the music festival to happen. And, because before you had everybody pushing in the same direction pretty much. They wanted Gaddafi out.
Right.
But then as soon as Gaddafi was out, it's like, well,
who's in charge now?
Yeah, and the Islamists, they were accepting the music because it was against Gaddafi, and everybody was pushing together.
But then it was time to impose a Sharia-type legal framework, right?
Well, that's what they were trying to do. When I was so after the revolution, you could see it slowly deteriorating, but up until May of 2012, I mean, I'd walk everywhere without worrying about it. And I'd see those Ansar al-Sharia guys everywhere. And I mean, reflecting back, it was probably absurd of me to be walking around a city that had no law and order. It was not very wise.
Well, hold on. Like, let's think about like what is the law? Like, the real law of respect for people. I mean, if anything, in a revolution, when people rise up together and say, this system based on violating people's rights, the system based on central control is unlawful and needs to be changed, then you like you said, you had that spirit of camaraderie and acceptance. That's the law. What happened then afterward, the various attempts of imposing what governments call law is what created conflict and more violence, right?
Well, what kept it together for the few months afterwards, so I noticed slowly there was a change happening, by the time we had the music festival scheduled in February, the Muslim Brotherhood came and swooped down and said, no, this is not happening. And then all these other festivals that were going to happen were canceled. Then the death threats and the bomb threats came in. Then bombings of the law offices. There was a gun battle near our house. These guys came in and they tried to steal cars, because what you were seeing then is what was kind of holding everything together was kind of the old tribal system in Libya to some extent, and which is really not a political system, and it's not a tribal system like we think. It really is a social contract in a way that you don't mess with. If I mess with him, I'm going to have to deal with his whole tribe, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of kept everything together. But then you had, I know a lot of people were coming from the outside, like Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb. The borders were porous, and people were flooding in from Algeria, from Chad, from Mali. And then slowly everything started transforming, and you could just feel it, like it was palpable in the air that this can't last forever, that they need some type of framework, because these guys are going to assert themselves, and everybody has like heavy, these guys have heavy weapons. And so, and then these, like the really extreme version, like, some Sharia law is actually, it's not that bad, but these extreme interpretations of it is the essence of totalitarianism, like what you see in the Islamic State in Iraq right now. And these guys adopted that kind of framework. It's like basically Salafis on crack. and Libya was having a severe problem at that point, where the World War II Commonwealth cemeteries had been vandalized. Amazingly, within 2 weeks, the Libyan people fixed them. They completely repaired the cemeteries. But then in Sabrata, the famous Roman ruins there, the Salafis went and they started destroying it. And it was only saved because the townfolk of Sabrata went and they started attacking them. But then these famous Sufi mosques all over Libya started being destroyed. Just like what you're seeing in Iraq right now with what the Islamic State is doing. They're about to destroy 50 mosques in the Mosul area, 50 of the Islam's most important mosques, because they have graves, they have tombs inside the mosque. So then these guys really started trying to assert themselves with this extreme form of Sharia law, but it really wasn't about that, because these guys were gangsters. The guy that runs Ansar al-Sharia was a car mechanic.
Yeah, it was an excuse. It was
it's just a veil.
Religion is just an excuse for brutality and control.
And unfortunately, it plays into the narrative, the U.S. foreign policy narrative, that about this extreme Islam, which they've used to their advantage to a great extent.
When you said the Salafis on crack came in, I thought you were referring to John McCain when he went to visit.
No. I'm actually referring, because the Salafis are, they have an extreme form of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
But even they have called Ansar al-Sharia terrorists.
Right. Well, I was going to say there's the difference, though, between that and ISIS is that the people that came into Libya, and I want to get your take on this, but my understanding is that they were directly financed by the American government in terms of aid, and this is why John McCain was there to identify who the good guys are, which is code for, who are the ones that are going to support the interests of the American government when they're in charge and give American oil companies access to the resources there. And I was like, wait a second, but no, ISIS is essentially a creation of American foreign policy as well. But for the people that came into Libya, how much of that do you think was, what do you think was the effect of that foreign influence and foreign financing?
I think Qatar has a lot to do with it, to be honest.
I
mean, these guys are putting their pieces on the risk board.
Okay, now let me just step back here, because a lot of Americans who are trying to understand foreign policy focus on the American government's manipulations, and they don't realize that there are the other major money powers, and that Qatar, while it's a tiny nation, is extremely rich and has lots of other security interests. And you're saying that they have people on the ground who are funding different groups as well.
Yeah, it's a game of risk. I mean, what you're seeing now too is the citadels of the Cold War are turning to sand.
What
between
about
former Soviet Union and the United States, and these bastions that were there in the Cold War are now just disintegrating, and it's creating a serious, and ISIS is a byproduct of that.
What about Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia's got their fingers all over the place, and I wouldn't be surprised. See, I didn't see any evidence of this stuff. You just see that you're like, how the hell did these guys get all these new Toyota Hiluxes or their new anti-aircraft guns that are better than the Army's? And there's some outside. Something is propelling it. I don't think it's the United States, though. I'll be honest with you. This is not beneficial to the Western powers at all, what's happening.
Yeah, they'll just take it as an excuse to drop some bombs.
Well, a low-level instability like what you had under Mubarak, that's an ideal form of tyranny to exploit. The tyranny that Egypt had was perfect for the United States.
How so?
Because you had a very pliant dictator, and he kept any of the unwanted people. They were a lot of the extremist organizations had their arrows pointed at him.
So he was cheap and effective, but to what end specifically, other than as a recipient of military aid and
rendition. I mean, these guys would happily torture the people we captured in Afghanistan. So we didn't have to dirty our hands doing that. I mean, this was pretty renditioning to places like Libya and Egypt. It was pretty extensive because they would do things that the U.S. it would be frowned upon if it was ever found out. I mean, it's bad enough the torture we did, but what Egypt and Libya, Gaddafi had no problem. He was at war with these Islamist guys anyways. He had no problem taking them out.
Well, hold on. Who's we here? I don't think you had anything to do with this.
I said he.
Oh, okay. Because I can say no. You said torture that other than torture that we engaged in.
Unfortunately, it's the.
I'm challenging your collectivist language there, but.
Oh, and I actually agree with you, but that's kind of embedded in our psyche.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I mean? I do agree with you because one chapter I really liked on in your book was basically about the patriotism as the worshipping of artificial lines.
Yeah.
And I would consider myself, I think patriotism is a very obsolete way of looking at the universe.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate that very much. I want to ask about the interest in torture, if you think this is true, because when you first said that, I was like, no, the United States doesn't care enough to get Egypt to torture, except that they're keeping their hands clean. And I think what's the ancillary, what's the secondary benefit of that? If the United States is sponsoring torture in Egypt, it means that they can keep everybody else in the whole region that much more afraid and controlled and subjugated, although the consequence, of course, is blowback, which is an excuse for more war. But do you think that's what is the United States incentive to torture people in Egypt?
Real estate. You don't have to feed the guys. It's let Egypt deal with that.
But why?
There's also the logistics of having to take care of more inmates.
That doesn't make any sense because the United States government is looking for excuses to spend money on military adventures. If the United States could say, oh yeah, torture's cool, we're going to run all of our own torture chambers and nobody's going to care, then they would be doing that. They would be doing that themselves.
Yeah, but you got to also look at that. United Nations is pretty ineffective, but the last thing you want is them breathing down your neck. So let Egypt deal with it.
Okay, but why is it? What is the incentive for the? It sounds like you're going off the assumption that the United States government cares about torturing people so that it can get information, so that it can actually stop terrorism. That's obviously not true. The United States government does not care about stopping terrorism. In fact, it wants to create more terrorism. So the real reason it would torture people is to induce fear and therefore control.
Yeah, to a certain extent, but I would say that as corrupt as the United States is, there's a great deal of incompetence in not understanding the rest of the world. Particularly our foreign policy is...
schizophrenic.
It is very schizophrenic, and so I think what you're seeing a lot of these things is just utter incompetence, too.
Yeah.
I will say guys like Cheney, they knew what they were doing. I mean, in 1994, he talked about why they didn't go into Baghdad. And of course, they did it. They did it 10 years later.
Yeah,
I mean, he specifically outlined the reasons not to go in. So this guy was well aware of what he was doing.
Yeah, no, he said, we're not going to go into Baghdad because you're going to create sectarian conflict and you're going to have the Kurds and the Sunnis and the Shia all fighting. And then they did it because at that time they wanted that. But back to Libya and your experience, I'm really curious to hear. This is a very cool story now with a few years' perspective on how there was a turning from what was hailed as a beautiful revolution of the Arab Spring into something that became religious and violent. And who's in charge now, and how did it come out of all of that?
Yeah, who's in charge? That's the $1 million question, or the $1 million dinar question. Well, one thing that the Western powers did, and they do continually a lot of, with these things is, job done, Gaddafi's dead, let's pat everybody on the back. And let's walk away. Good luck.
Mm-hmm.
And then these Libyans. See, one thing people have to understand is Gaddafi left no real infrastructure. He ran it like a mafia godfather. There was very little infrastructure. Particularly, Tripoli was a little different. I mean, Tripoli was built up. It was a very modern city. But Benghazi, you would see, like in 1969 when he took power, most of the building projects just stopped. And you just see skeletons of buildings everywhere. And he just let a beautiful city, a jewel on the Mediterranean, just deteriorate and crumble. And now it looks like Dresden after World War II. And this was without any bombings or anything. It was amazing. I was walking around saying, this is how much damage was done during the 4 days of the beginning of the revolution, and then March 19th when Gaddafi invaded. Oh, no, this has been like that since I've been alive. And my friend Hamuda, who was, he left in his 20s in 1975, he was making me imagine, like, just how glorious the city was with the Italian buildings mixed with the Libyan architecture. It must have been something to behold and seeing pictures like that. But Gaddafi left nothing in the east. It was just he would extract the oil and leave these people with absolutely nothing. So the ideas, these ideas of democracy, we've had, a republic for 200 odd years, and we still don't know what the hell we're doing.
Well, hold on. Before I get to our last question, because we're almost out of time, what do you give any credence to the idea that the Western powers and the banking powers had an interest in taking out Gaddafi because he was working on a gold-backed currency for Africa?
No. I don't think that's the case at all. I think around 2003 or so, everybody was wanting to do business with Gaddafi. And Gaddafi, particularly his son Saif, was very pro-West. Very pro-West.
Mm.
And his son Saif was slowly taking over and convincing Daddy to start investing and to start opening up the borders, particularly to these like Italy and England, and to really, to reap the benefits of that, because they had been, isolated for so long because of the Lockerbie and, the German nightclub bombing, that suddenly Gaddafi became also the war against terror, because if he had been fighting these Islamists for 10 years already. And I mean, brutal fighting. Gaddafi was brutal with that, and the West really liked that. So I don't think they had that much reason to try to destabilize it, because, I mean, look at how awful it is now for any type of investment in Libya. I mean...
Right, well, okay, so finally then, from what you saw in the turning point and all of the foreign influence of what was going on, who was the most successful, who was the most influential in terms of determining who was in charge, and how much of an effect did that have versus what would have happened organically or internally without that external influence?
I think the Muslim Brotherhood, they hijacked the revolution.
And you think that's there's a lot of people from the region, but that's really relatively organic?
No. Muslim Brotherhood is an alien force in Libya.
Sponsored or from where then?
Muslim Brotherhood is from Egypt, but what they have been doing is importing the exporting the ideology, and the Libyans in the '60s in particular hated the Muslim Brotherhood. Mm-hmm. I mean, despised them. And now on the street today, even when I was there, that people couldn't stand them, but they're just very well organized and well backed, and a lot of them ran on an independent ticket, and they got into parliament, so it looked like the Muslim Brotherhood lost in 2012, but they had a huge number advantage in the parliament. And then they started funneling all the money to these militias, like the Libya Shield, the Misrata militias, Ansar al-Sharia, and they basically, they were like little Gaddafis. I mean,
you say backed by whom, and who would be more effective at backing them, and who would have an interest in backing them? Because if you say, if they're not backed by some other government or some other financial interest, then I would say even if it's an external thing, it's sort of organic to, like it's legitimate. There's no corrupt influence. It really is just religious fanaticism that, you know, it has combined with a unique formula of brutality that has taken on a certain
the Muslim Brotherhood are not necessarily brutal. I mean, some of they're corrupt and
committed,
yeah, but for them, I mean, you talk to most Muslim Brotherhood guys, and they're not exactly violent people. I mean, I had a lot of experience with them, and most of the guys are pretty normal. I mean, I'm not religious, so their ideas are irritating. But
then someone would have an interest in them succeeding or failing. Egypt
in particular. Egypt at the time, you know, the Brotherhood won Morsi. And so I'm sure they were getting backing from Egypt, except it was probably more of Egypt's sponsors that were backing them because Egypt was still kind of reeling from its Arab Spring light that it had.
You mean Egypt's sponsors is in the United States government?
I don't think so. I think more of, I come back, I have no proof of this, but the whispers were Qatar. So, as I said, though, I'm just speculating, but that was what was all the whispers on the ground when I was there. Everybody expected Qatar had some part to do with it. There's a lot of money coming in from the outside, and frankly, what is really apparent is the West just kind of turned their back. USAID, wherever they are, that's a bad sign. I will say, from personal experience, that's a really bad sign when USAID comes in. It's really a spearhead of the United States government. But
it would make sense that the power of even the CIA to influence events there would not be nearly as significant as either the money powers in Qatar or Saudi Arabia or the political powers in Egypt. And I take it that's the takeaway from this.
Yeah, I think the United States had very little to do with Libya, to be honest.
Except for the bombing part.
Except for the bombing, but we also kind of we went to the back, the United States went to the back and let France and England take the brunt of that. Because the U.S. clearly didn't want to be involved. I think the how Obama approached it and how the whole United States government, the State Department approached it in the beginning, it was clear that they were reluctant to get involved, but France and England were very convincing. Because France and England have a lot more at stake.
Well, you say that they didn't want to, but I think it might be more accurate to say the American or multinational oil companies did not see an angle that they could take advantage of and decided not to compete.
No, because Gaddafi was starting to open up and give him contracts. You know, it was no longer Gaddafi got bored with socialism. I mean, he did. Gaddafi was one of those. He was like a hipster. He'd adopt an idea. He's oh yeah, communism seems pretty cool, but he had none of the philosophical understanding of what he was doing. I mean, that is so clear to me. If you read the Green Book, it is utter nonsense.
What's the Green Book?
The Green Book is the final solution to democracy that Gaddafi wrote, a philosophical political treatise, where he says one of his profound statements is women bleed and men don't. So he was a very observant guy. I mean, seriously, it is inane third-grade stuff.
Yeah.
His ideas.
Yeah, much like his fashion sense, of course.
But everybody had to read it. It was a requirement. It was lauded as the great solution between democracy, between capitalism and communism.
You have to wonder, because someone like that has to have advisors. Who was really surrounding him? But Matthew, thanks so much for the call. What did you produce out of this? Is there somewhere that people can find some of the footage that you got?
I did a short film called We Win or We Die in the First 4 Days of the Revolution about a suicide bomber, actually. A regular guy, a 50-year-old guy who decided to crash his car into the gates of the fortress, and that's what caused the fortress.
Give me a second here. Having a little bit of technical difficulty here. Again, my browser freezes up, so I only have this problem with this. Hold on, we might have it back. Maybe.
Fortress to fall and Benghazi to be freed.
Wow.
And then the big film I've been working on for 3 years, and I'm in the middle of editing it right now, but is on the music explosion that just blossomed out of Benghazi, and how it's kind of withered a little bit, but the musicians are really pushing onward. We've gotten interest from Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden and Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits. So we're going to have a few big acts that are involved somehow in the film.
Very cool. Is there a website people can find out more about this?
Yeah, the film is called Post-Revolutionary Blues. You can go to postrevolutionaryblues.com, and it also has samples of the music.
We're just having all kinds of problems here. Give me a second while I get everything back up.
And just go through it. You're going to be amazed at the variety and the talent that these guys have.
Well,
and
thanks.
This is this was in the darkness, discovering all this music. So
very cool. I'm glad you got that narrative out of it and that kind of media that we have to look forward to. But I really want to thank you for sharing this much more nuanced understanding of how things went down that I think, even most people who are paying attention through the mainstream media probably don't have any sense of at this point.
Well, I just want to end with my film. Just people just forget about the politics and the cynicism going on, and just remember that there could be a guy in Tennessee. He sees this guy in Benghazi playing Slayer. He's going to forget he's a Muslim. He's going to go, "Wow, that guy can play Slayer." It builds a bridge 5,000 miles at the speed of light.
All right.
Beauty of music.
Thanks so much, brother.
All right. Thanks a lot, Adam.
Have a good night.
Okay, well, you heard his take on his belief of what was behind the whole revolution and how it was hijacked. Now, I think what was behind it and funding Muslim Brotherhood goes a little bit deeper. If you look at the United States use of terror networks, they tend to be the ones that seem to create or fund them. So you have to really question it. Okay, give me a second here. Okay. There we go. Okay, I have a story out of benswan.com, and this kind of feeds into how our U.S. Hold on here. Maybe it wasn't Ben Swan that I had that one from. Let me see if I can find it. But, I found it. Okay. It is Al Ben Swan. And, Al-Qaeda. It's pretty well known that we helped create and fund Al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan, definitely, when the Russians were there. This one out of Ben Swan is kind of, it's really, really heartbreaking. But this seems to be what you're going to get when you are mixing our foreign policy with these countries in the Middle East and how we seem to destabilize them and make them 100 times worse than what they were when we got there. Even under these brutal dictatorships are not matching the instability of these regions now. This one now, Ben Swan. ISIS continued spreading violence as children are being beheaded. Yes, you heard it right. In a video interview with CNN's Jonathan Mann, Chaldean American leader Mark Arabo has described the current situation for non-Muslim civilians in the Islamic State as a Christian genocide. During the video, Arabo described how thousands of Christians in Iraq are fleeing to neighboring countries as violence is continued to be spread by ISIS. Specifically, Arabo told on. Children are being beheaded, mothers are being raped and killed, and fathers are being hung. There's actually a park in Mosul where they actually beheaded children and put their heads on a stick, Rabo said. They're doing the most horrendous, the most heartbreaking crimes that you can think of. And there's a link to images. Opposing View is also reporting a surge of systematic violence towards non-Sunni Muslims in the Islamic State, saying Christians, Kurds, and other Muslim demonstrations are facing similar levels of violence. This violence has killed at least 5,500 civilians, wounded close to 12,000, and driven some 1.2 million from their homes since January, according to a July report from The Guardian. This is a country that we went in and supposedly brought democracy. The problem is when the violent people become the majority, the democracy fails every time. That's why it really, truly comes down to the individual. I got a quick clip from Ron Paul. Well, it's not from Ron Paul, but it's of Ron Paul. And he's asked a question. And it's about anarchy. And one of his responses, to be an anarchist is a great idea. I'll let you listen to the full thing here.
Leanna Brise on our Facebook page asks, I'm finding myself more distant from government involvement in general. Is it healthy to think like an anarchist, or what are your views on anarchy?
Well, I think if somebody is an anarchist and they totally believe in no government and they don't use force at the moment to go and start shooting up the government so we don't have any government, that would be wrong. But to be an anarchist and assume responsibility for yourself, I think this is a great idea. And there's a lot of people, there's a lot of very close friends of mine who think political action is terrible and worthless. I happen to be one that believes that education is probably paramount, but political action can be very helpful, and sometimes political action, my elections and things, and galvanizing interest is a measurement of our success on our ideas. So I think this is very important. But anarchy is not harmful to me. As long as you, especially if you give up on, if you're a true libertarian, you've rejected the use of force. I don't have to worry about you. But if you don't want to, your biggest problem of being an anarchist in a government that doesn't agree with you is that, well, I want to opt out. They're going to come with guns. But, we do have incidents where some people do get to opt out. And, when you think about the Amish and the Mennonites, I think they get exempt, and they like to just think those groups, why couldn't all of us have that opportunity? Look, we voluntarily want to get out, and we want to take care of ourselves. Either an individual should be allowed to do that and get no benefits from the government, or a group can do that. A libertarian society actually gives full permission for socialism, voluntary socialism. If you want to get together, and there's been experiments with that in our history, you can have voluntary socialism. If you go together and you agree, and we're running this community, large, small, whatever, on a social scheme, you should be allowed to. But we should be allowed, to stay out of that. But the problem is, it's so inefficient that the socialists know their system is going to fail, so they have to use the force of a government gun to take money from the people who aren't socialists in order to subsidize their program. But libertarianism gives full legal protection of anybody who wants to have voluntary socialism. But socialists never will endorse the idea of you having your personal liberty where you can take care of yourself and not ask for nothing from anybody else.
And when you look at that idea, it works if you don't have a central monopoly on force. That central monopoly on force is what inhibits the ability for someone to be free. Now people ask, well then who would, Ron Paul said that when you look at, legal protection under a libertarian society, and people are like, well, it's anarchy, you don't have legal protection. Well, no, you do, because you're living under a society that believes in your ability to have your socialist type community where you buy up property and you decide, well, this is how it's going to run. But if someone buys property off another person and they don't want to be a part of that experiment, you can't force them. But if they're buying in a community like that, usually it's because that's where they want to live. They want that social. But, because these often fail, that's where we find the problems. Socialism has been an experiment that has been produced throughout hundreds and even thousands of years. Why has freedom become a philosophy? It's because of the constant failure of the socialist ideology. That you can have a ruler that will equally distribute the wealth, throughout the nation or country or empire. Where can you see that failing? Or has failed? Well, just look at the United Kingdom. Look at the wealth that the royal family has acquired. And how much wealth they distributed throughout the country. They got a lot more than their fair share, you would think. But they're the ones that ran the country and the empire. Yeah, and they expanded beyond their capabilities. Spent a lot of money fighting countries that were being created out of the different colonies. Your people died while they sat in their castles and had lavish things because they were able to rule over you. The concept of liberty, one thing about the Declaration of Independence, it was a new idea being attempted in hopes of freedom. Now you can argue that, a lot of people do, but the simple fact is, at that time, for those people, for that culture, that English culture that here in America started becoming a different culture, a different belief, because for so long they have had the freedom. But then you start getting bigger taxes, and you actually start noticing it. Well, back then, in America, they were so free that that little bit of tax and the growing kind of despise that someone on the other side of the ocean that they would want to control you, and the newer generations growing up, they said, no, that's not right. I can go out here and do whatever I want. You know, why should they be able to send people over here on boats and tell me what to do? Well, you know, the same concept should be in your mindset to what's going on today. Now, when Ron Paul talks about the political system, I understand what he's trying to do. Because, like me, he doesn't want a violent revolution. And he wants to reduce government involvement in your life. That way we can maybe start working towards freedom instead of the opposite direction. Now, many people say, well, it's not going to work. It might not. But should I demonize him for attempting, for trying? No. Give me a second here. Okay, I have a small problem here. Here we go. Now, this was pretty interesting, and I seen this at the freethoughtproject.com. Bad cop. Don't give me a effing attitude, retard. Says here, 3 teens decided they would pull a prank on officers patrolling the beach. They donned their faces, their fake beer mugs, and went to it. The first officer they encountered is some verbally abusive power trip. She proceeds to violate the rights of these guys by detaining them for no reason and demand their IDs. These guys should never have answered any of her questions. They should have began the entire confrontation with the magic question, am I being...
In order to share and collaborate on...
I don't know what that is.
Files. We decided to move to Dropbox for business because it was very easy to use and it gave me the...
I have no idea what that was. Alright, let's close out all the browsers and I'll restart them here. That's the problem with a lot of these websites. Now I have my browser flipping out. I think something's going on here. Because I do not see anything playing. Okay, now I have it. Wow. Okay, where was I? Here comes the good cop. He realizes that the mugs are fake and laughs about it. Only because of the first cop's negative attitude did this prank even work. Had she been nice like the second cop, it would have been over before it began. Now the second bad cop, he claims he smells weed in order to try to violate the rights of these kids even further. Eventually the shakedown ends and they are free to go, but not before the I smell bacon jab. Enjoy. Let's go ahead and play this. And just see the difference in the way they talk between the two and the good cop. Which you can claim that no cop is good, but that's for you to claim.
Seriously. Hey, it's fake. It's fake.
What are you doing with that?
Just hanging out.
Just hanging out with what the f*** is that in your cup?
It's nothing. It's nothing.
Oh, there's nothing in it. Yeah, seriously, think that's funny.
Hey, finish it and keep it moving.
You really think that shit's funny? Come over here. Three of you. Sit over there. Nails, blood, shorts, gray tank.
Beautiful day.
Yellow khaki shorts, white t-shirt. You guys got IDs on you?
Yeah. No.
Get them out. Give them to me. I'm on the stand in front of
Yes, I swear to God.
Where's your ID?
At home.
You just walk around with no ID?
Today, yeah.
What's your first name?
Liam.
Last?
Liam, L-I-A-M.
Like your drinks, guys.
Thank you.
How big they are.
Thank you.
It's pretty sweet.
A-H-E-R.
What's your last name?
G-A-L-L-A-G-H-E-R.
Yeah!
A-E, I didn't do anything else. Drinking air.
What?
Love drinking air.
Don't give me a attitude.
Next round,
I asked you.
and I told you twice.
You told me one time and you're not speaking clearly.
G-A-L-L-A-G-H-E-R.
Got a mess with people's farm over here at the beach here when you have
When's your
your
birthday?
2/17/97. Apparently I'm a retard.
Yeah, you are.
Like your style.
It's chicken. Freaking what?
Next one's Tom 455 014.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah.
Hey, it's free to keep the drink cold?
Yeah.
I did really? These are like cool mugs?
Yeah.
Where'd you get them?
I think it was like Walmart.
Are you serious?
Yeah. They were $15 a piece though. They're kind of pricey.
They last? How long you had them?
They break actually pretty easily. They had to epoxy this one. It cracked.
Like what's in it? Like a gel?
I think so.
Wow, that is so cool. That is awesome. I think you're good. You're good. They got what? They trick you? They got us. They got me. I'm like, you guys should sort that out. Thank you. get you guys into class clowns in school. Anybody ever told you you look like the guy from what movie? One of the two twins from what movie?
The Matrix. The Matrix?
Yeah. That's pretty badass. Though.
Yeah.
What do you do to get your hair that color? Is it natural that color?
Yeah.
Really?
Uh-huh.
That's pretty cool. Where you guys from?
Here. Yeah.
I like you guys. You guys are alright. You good? Tanya? You good? Can I check them or anything? Or think they have some fake weed on them too?
We got little pots. We usually carry around a little pot. Like little pots, like flower pots. Yeah. Actually, I got a little pot on me.
Another cop is pulling up right now.
I'll take a selfie.
Holy blonde dreads.
Yep.
Is it weed that I'm smelling off you guys?
Nah.
Yeah, it is.
No, it's not.
You guys got anything in your pockets?
No.
Why?
You want to
As soon as I walked over here to you guys, I just got a big whiff of it.
Well, I think I
Why?
smell bacon.
You guys got something on you? If you do, just hand it to me.
You think we'd be drinking this stuff?
I'm just asking you. Because I just smelled this second I just got out with you guys. You guys have something on?
No, sir.
Honesty goes a long way with me. If you guys have something on you, give it to me now. If I search you and find it, you're going to go to jail. Understand me?
Yeah.
You got anything on you?
No.
What's possible?
Be gone.
Bye.
See ya. Cheers.
And they are like it. It's just, it's amazing how they treat them. You had one cop come in, oh, you know, this just harmless joke, you know, you're okay, you're doing good. And she finally goes, yeah, I'm fine. And he leaves, and that's when the other cop walks in and starts giving him a hard time. Like, she wanted the second cop to leave, that way she could get someone that would have that more intimidating attitude. Pretty idiotic. After you see what these kids had, you know that they're pranking. Come on. But that's the type of attitude that a lot of law enforcement have. But there's ways around it by not living where you have law enforcement walking everywhere. Where they way if there's some type of violence going on. There's pockets, places. I have out of WashingtonTimes.com. Russian bombers penetrate U.S. airspace at least 16 times in the past 10 days. Russian strategic nuclear bombers conducted at least 16 incursions into northwestern U.S. air defense identification zones over the past 10 days. An unusual sharp increase in aerial penetrations, according to U.S. defense officials. Numerous flight encounters by Tu-95 Russian Bear H bombers prompted the scrambling of U.S. jet fighters on several occasions and come amid heightened U.S.-Russia tensions over Ukraine. Also, during one bomber incursion near Alaska, a Russian intelligence gathering jet was detected along with the bombers. And I have a clip to play. It's Washington time, so let's see if it'll even play. Their player doesn't ever want to seem to work. Doesn't seem to want to load. I don't know what this might signal. I'm not sure. One thing is for sure that tensions are definitely being ramped up about this. We're going to see some more dividing and conquering. Hate them, hate them, hate them, hate them. They're trying to divide you. They definitely don't want you talking good about Russia. Talking about them not wanting something. The Obama administration, again, is bullying banks to cut ties with gun dealers. And out of benswan.com, it happened in a pawn shop in South Carolina. Inman Gun and Pawn was forced to close 2 of its checking accounts due to Operation Choke Point, which is an Obama administration effort to hinder financial fraud. No, it's not. But the Obama administration is using a broad brush to define what constitutes fraud and is instead using executive powers through the Department of Justice to shut down businesses that Obama finds unsavory, like gun sales. We had an excellent relationship. We had ample funds in the accounts to do anything that we needed to do, said Morris Williams of Inman Gun and Pawn in Spartanburg, South Carolina. We thought everything was just wonderful until we received this letter. The letter states that due to the rules and regulations for deposit accounts, the bank, SunTrust Bank, asked William to close 2 of his accounts. The only thing that they will tell us is that we have been deemed a prohibited business type, he said. So they're actually, the Obama administration through the Department of Justice, Eric Holder, the same one that ran the Fast and Furious operation, is now saying that they are a prohibited business. Don't tell me that Fast and Furious wasn't an attempt to demonize gun owners. And here's this clip out of Ben Swan.
In a Fox Carolina investigation, a Spartanburg County business owner is aiming his frustrations at bank administrators. This all centers around his shop, the Inman Gun and Pawn Shop on Asheville Highway. He says bank executives made him close 2 accounts, and he wants to know why. Our own Jennifer Phillips is live in Inman at the shop with details on the situation. Jen?
Hey, Cody, the business owner here, says that he's running a legit business and he doesn't understand why a particular bank no longer wants to do business with him. But he says he believes the federal administration is behind it all. Even as a boy, Morris Williams had a gun in his hands.
I had grown up hunting with my dad.
And now he sells them at Inman Gun and Pawn in Spartanburg County. He's the owner.
This business has been here since the early 90s.
Not only are there guns, but there are guitars, movies, and chainsaws. But now he says SunTrust Bank is cutting him off and asked him to close 2 checking accounts he says he opened for his business.
We have an excellent relationship. We had ample funds in the accounts to do anything we needed to do.
He says he's a target of a bank regulation influenced by the feds.
We thought everything was just wonderful until we received this letter.
The letter states under the rules and regulations for deposit accounts, we must ask you to close listed accounts.
The only thing that they will tell us is that we have been deemed a prohibitive business type.
We looked up examples of what could be considered prohibited businesses. And businesses like weapons, porn products, bankruptcy lawyers, and psychic services made the list.
We've asked our local branch manager, and we have asked corporate, what basis they made this decision.
So now he says he's firing back in an effort to warn other business owners. Now, administrators with SunTrust Bank say although they can't comment on specific accounts or clients, they did release this statement. Take a look. They say, quote, "This is the statement here. As a general rule, we do enable banking relationships with licensed firearms dealers. There are some businesses that we will no longer maintain banking relationships with, particularly those in certain businesses such as payday lenders and pawn shops, due to the increased risk and cost associated with serving such accounts." Now, the owner here tells us he's already found a new bank. Live in Inman, Jennifer Phillips, Fox Carolina News Tonight.
Now, I don't believe it's because he was a pawn shop. Pawn shops usually do pretty good, definitely in bad economies. The pawn shops really are doing pretty good right now. You got people having to sell crap, and then people taking advantage of cheap prices. But when they say a prohibited business, that's not saying it's because of he's a pawn shop. That's saying it's because he sells weapons. It's pretty evident in the letter. So their statement is just another BS type story. Some more news about New Hampshire location of the Free State Project. A lot of Free Staters out there, and numbers keep growing. Start 360 PAC aims to make New Hampshire a pro-liberty powerhouse. Out of benswan.com. A group of entrepreneurs and liberty activists just announced the launch of a new political action committee called Stark 360. The PAC is focused on pursuing libertarian-minded political objectives in New Hampshire, a critical state in the presidential election process, as it is home to the first-in-the-nation party primary elections Stark 360 is named after New Hampshire-born Revolutionary War hero General John Stark, best known for his heroic actions at the Battle of Bennington in 1777. The committee's site contains the following quote by Stark, which happens to be the source of New Hampshire's state motto: "Live free or die, death is not the worst of evils." Stark 360 has outlined a specific set of step-by-step objectives that it aims to achieve over the next few years. First on the list is the election of 32-year-old millennial Republican tech entrepreneur Andrew Hemingway to the position of governor of New Hampshire. If Hemingway, who once served as a chairman of the state's Republican Liberty Caucus, prevails in the September 9th GOP primary, he will face incumbent Democrat Governor Maggie Hassan. In the general election in November, second on Stark 360's agenda is the achievement of a pro-liberty majority among Republicans in the state legislature. The group also has eyes on the 2016 Republican presidential primary, as it hopes to lay the groundwork to win by a Liberty candidate. According to the organization's mission statement, it plans to achieve these goals by deploying a statewide data-driven grassroots campaign that will endure beyond 2014 and address a fundamental structural weakness of the Republican Party. Aaron Day, chair of Stark 360, expressed the group's concerns with politics as usual in the Granite State. In recent years, New Hampshire has picked losing presidential candidates. A small elite group of the New Hampshire Republican establishment, corrupted by DC interest groups, has disenfranchised New Hampshire voters, alienated the youth vote, and manipulated party rules for personal advantage. Our data-driven grassroots infrastructure will restore the Republican Party back to the liberty-loving citizens of New Hampshire and serve as a model for the rest of the nation. Stark 360's team includes founder and chair Aaron Day, who serves as CEO of the think tank, the Atlas Society, chairman of the Republican Liberty Caucus of New Hampshire, chairman of the Free State Project, a member of the Hillsborough County Republican Committee, and board member of the Bedford Republican Committee. Co-founder Matt Phillips once interned for the Cato Institute prior to joining forces with the internet advertiser DoubleClick and selling his company Right Media to Yahoo Inc. He now serves on the board of the Free State Project as a member of the Hillsborough County Republican Committee and the chairman of the Board of Ethics and Economics Education Inc. Treasurer and Special Advisor Dan Baker, also founder and principal attorney for the DB Capital Strategies, has experience as counselor to over 30 PACs and 20 members of the U.S. House and Senate. And it goes on, but I think we might, in this whole article, be seeing some of the flaws in the Free State Project and why a lot of Free Staters feel disenfranchised from the actual Free State Project anymore. Most of them, some of the original members. The people that initially got it really rolling. And I think a lot of them do feel disenfranchised. But some of them I also believe, I really believe that they've moved beyond politics. And they really just want to focus on creating a environment in New Hampshire where there would be too much of a resistance for the federal government to try to impose things on them. Whether that's ability that they would have, I don't know. Even if you had everybody in New Hampshire, would you be able to stop the federal government from coming in there? I personally don't think so. But if pockets pop up throughout the nation in such a widespread way, I think that has a better chance of overwhelming the system when you spread their resources thinner. It makes it hard for them to enforce things. When you have wide civil disobedience, I think that is when it's most effective. That's why it's so important to spread the message of liberty, not come here, live here, and learn about liberty. It's to spread it. But in the political sense that I think the Free State Project has always been about, I understand why they might want to do something. The only thing is, do you trust the people that are at the top? I don't know enough about these people. Them playing the political role, I think, plays a lot into why they have a dislike for certain people that were a part of the Free State Project. Because they'll paint a bad picture for them, I think, is what that's about. They're afraid of a bad picture because they are playing the political game. So, you know, it's kind of a messy thing, I think. Okay. I'm just making sure this will actually load up. I don't know if it will. Okay. This out of We Are Change. High-level government pedophile to be exposed. And we know that a lot of these child trafficking people have claimed in the past to, service, I guess, a lot of elite people throughout the world, including the U.S. But this one is claiming to be a high-level government official. And it's Brian Clare at the Children Screaming to Be Heard event in London, England. Brian is one of many victims of child sex abuse in England and details the story of what he had to go through. Brian currently has a criminal court case against a high-level British elite who is responsible for the child sex abuse. And there's been a lot of speculation on suspicious deaths of people that said they were going to expose high-level people. And I hope that he stays safe in what he's doing, because I think when you start trying to out a lot of the elite people, unless the other elites, if they want to use him for a fall guy or out him out, they might do something to that point. But a lot of times it seems that these people end up dead. But let me go ahead and play this.
Out the original 16 of us, 12 have killed themselves. Wow. You know, that's a major what hits me. Yes, my name's Brian Clare. I'm a survivor from the childcare system. My story is when I was young, I was hit by a fire engine at 6-year-old. I had so-called behavioural difficulties. I was taken into the care system where I was abused and raped, and I was took out to North Wales and abused by a very powerful person.
Would it be okay for you to name the person?
Not at the minute, because there's an action going ahead.
What's the current action that's going ahead?
Obviously, with what's been discovered in that, I've got my barrister helping us, and we're just going ahead from there. I can't really say too much at this moment in time, but I can tell you my story. Yes, and obviously after I got hit with the fire engine, I developed epilepsy, but they put it down to attention deficit disorder. So I was took into care where I was put into a cell, and the cell was like a police cell. Yeah, and this was at 6-year-old, and had plastic windows. And what happened was, the second night I was there, a person called Seamus Raylan, he actually raped us. And how to get out the cell. Sorry to blame everybody, but how I got out the cell is I had to go. I don't mean to offend you, but I had to go down on him. Yeah, and that was the only way to get out the cell, so I had to do sexual favours. Now, as I was getting older, I knew this was wrong, and it was also because of the stuff that I was witnessing as well, that I truly believed that I was kept in care a lot longer. Yeah, but the difference is with me. I mean, what's made us stronger is because it's all about survival. You know, it's about survival of the fittest. But you think about it, people. Yeah, at the end of the day, yeah. What about them children? What's in the system now? What can't fight back? Yeah, and it affects every single parent. And eventually it'll be your child what's going to be hit, and I mean that, you know. And I mean, you can't check us out, you know, and do your own research. But I mean, I'm not the only one who was abused in the care system. I mean, we can see it all over England, you know. And at the end of the day, we've got to do something before it's too late. I fear for my son's future. You know, this country is coming really, really bad when it comes to the children. You know, they want the children to be robots, and I'm afraid each child is individual.
So this, all the abuse that you went through happened at the foster care system?
You know, it wasn't in the foster system. I was put into a detention centre. Yeah, assessed. While I was there, I was abused. So naturally, I'm going to fight back. And because I fought back, they actually said I should have been kept in care a lot longer. But what it is I had a form of epilepsy. Yeah, and they didn't give us no sort of medical. They just assumed, yes. So I was kept in care for nearly 10 years.
What are some important aspects of your story that
what stick out to us most is why did they do it when every single staff member there was equally as guilty as, because they knew what was going on, and I know for a fact I wasn't the only one. Yeah, and the most important factor is out of the original 16 of us, there's only 12 left. Out of the original 16 of us, 12 have killed themselves. You know, that's a major what hits me. You know, and all the campaigning and everything I've done, I've never done it for myself, and I never will. Time again, you get people saying, well, you've got to think about yourself. No, I'm lucky. I survived. Yeah, it's the children what's in the system now. It's the children what's been taken. Can you imagine what this country is going to be like in years to come?
Wow. Is there anything else, because I know you have the court case, so I don't want to ask questions that will get you in trouble. But as far as details of dates, we can't ask who's responsible. Can we ask who failed in the system to allow this to happen?
Who failed in the system? Obviously the local authorities, but it goes above that because it goes to central government. You know, because ultimately who controls the local authorities? It's the government, isn't it? And this paedophile ring, what's come out now, what they're on about with the MPs and stuff, yeah, this was running years ago. Everybody thinks, the general public thinks this is just fairly new. It's not. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, after 30 years of campaigning, there's an international link, you know. It's just like what happened in North Wales, where the diplomats were flying in, they were asking for a child, and they were abusing the child.
Wow. What should people know about what you went through?
Basically, what people should know is, seeing my mum's situation, what it was. She was a single mother. Yeah, after I'd got hit by the fire engine, I was developing behavioural difficulties. My mum went out to try and get some help, and it ended up me being put in care. So at the end of the day, the actual social services took advantage of a single mother, and that's what's going on all over the country now.
Where can people find out more about your situation?
More about my situation, if the type Brian Clare campaigner, or if the type Operation Rose Blogspot, my story's on there. But I must put a trigger warning on because it's quite deep.
Anything else that you think people should know out there?
Yes, the best, most important thing is that all the children what's being taken, and it's not a possibility. It's a fact that some of these children are getting taken abroad and used in using sexual videos. We've all seen Elm Guest House. We've seen what was happening in Lambeth. You know, and it isn't only like, how can I put it? It isn't only limited to Lambeth or Elm Guest House. It's actually going on all over the country. And at the end of the day, this is organised. It's organised paedophilia. Yeah, it's a paedophile information exchange. It's simple as because at the end of the day, they've actually infiltrated. Infiltrated the government. And remember, people usually are the ones who vote these people in.
What do you think about the information that has been breaking recently with the pedophile scandal?
You mean with when they're calling for an international? When they're calling for an individual? Well, that's a good point actually. It's a damn good point, because how can you have an independent investigation when it's the government looking into the government? That itself says it all, doesn't it? I mean, obviously we're getting rid of Justice Butler Slush, but now there's talk of the NSPCC taking over. Yeah. Now, some people think that. I mean, don't get us wrong. I've got my reasons why I'm anti-NSPCC. For starters, we've got Mandelson, who's head of had a policy at NSPCC. Yeah, another MP allegedly paedophile. And I say allegedly because, let's say I'd say allegedly, you know. And the fact is, NSPCC is government funded. Yeah, the NSPCC is government funded, so they're not going to go against the government anywhere because the government will just take the money away. It's all about money and power over the child, and it's got to stop. Simple as it's got to stop. I'm lucky I survived.
Can you give us some reference point to the investigation that's happening? Can you just explain what's happening to the viewer, like in America, who hasn't been reading the news?
Yeah, it's basically what it is to our American friends is it's basically we all know this Penn State inquiry. Yes, it's basically very, very similar to that because obviously you think about it, just like the Penn State inquiry, them children who didn't have mums and dads, yeah, they could just do what they wanted, you know. Them children could have been murdered. There could have been anything, you know. And this is what I'm saying, that if say this child is took away and there's no reference in this country, once that child's gone, there's no reference to the parents where that child is. That's it. It's like I'm saying, that child could have gone abroad. That child could have been satanically abused, which is happening. You know, it's simple as. And at the end of the day, this is not just England. It's happening all over the world, and it has to stop. Children are children. Children are our future.
Are you by any chance in contact with the 6 other people who are going through the same abuses?
I am in contact with other survivors. Yes.
And they have the same stories.
Yes. Yes, originally with my case, which is explained on Operation Rose Blogspot. Originally with my case, obviously it took 5 years for me to get everybody together. I got the backing of the local paper, which was the Sunderland Echo, and it developed from there, and it developed into an police operation called Operation Rose.
What are your hopes for this court case?
To get justice. Whether it'll happen or not, people, I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's a start, isn't it? You know, and the public's got to be more educated. The public have got to come forward and express their views, yeah, which they're not doing. Because what you find in England is, if it's not happening to their children, they're not bothered. But it will happen to their children, and it'll happen to your children, viewers.
Very, very well said. Is there anything else you want people out there to understand, to know? Is there anything else you want to say to everybody else?
Yeah, you still get the attitude like, oh, he's come forward for compensation. He's come forward for compensation. Well, I can tell you for a fact, I was awarded compensation, yeah, and I deliberately, like I say, I originally went for the court case, which was a fortnight of deliberation, yeah, and because of something, this was another court case with the workhouse workers, yeah, and what happened was it was a fortnight of deliberation which showed you there was enough evidence, yeah, because of something called abusive process in the English law, which meant there was too much publicity surrounding the case. They actually got away with it, and I say they got away with it because at the end of the day they were guilty.
And they compensated you. They tried to give you money.
Yeah, they did. They give us. I was advised to go forward for compensation, and I thought, well, I can use this compensation to help others. So what I've done is I donated it to a number of organisations because I didn't judge it as my money.
And now you're keeping the fight going with more.
I'll keep the fight forever going till my last dying breath. Because, like I say, children are our future. I know how lucky I am. There's plenty of people killed themselves, yeah. And at the end of the day, children are our future.
Anything else you want to do or say?
No, I'd just like the listeners, just obviously, and the viewers, sorry, just to listen to what I'm saying. Obviously, there's going to be some doubts of people saying, "Oh, this doesn't happen. He's just jumping on the bandwagon." But all I can say is, do your own research. Yeah, and that's my advice to you. Do your own research, and eventually you'll find out it's true. Yeah, and it's got to stop, because I fear for my son's future. I really do fear in fact, I fear for the future of the planet, because it's because it's bad. Because at the end of the day, children are Mother Nature, aren't they? Yeah, you get what cheers you up more than anything is when you see a child smile or a child laugh. It's the best thing in the world, isn't it? You know, but all I'm asking, yeah, is you please, please, please protect the children.
Okay. And we know there's, so much reports of, so-called civilized countries, with the child trafficking and it being facilitated or allowed to happen by people in power. A lot of allegations of that by people that have been a part of the system. Now, can some of them be in line? Yes, but I doubt the majority of them are. I doubt that many people come out and say things like that to get attention. And definitely, when they've had, reports of problems, where they've reported being abused, but never really ever looked into. Probably because someone just didn't want it looked into. Some of them, I'm sure, they probably had no one to report to. They didn't have anybody to say, hey, this is happening to me, because the people that they would go to are the people doing the harming. Another place, I really think that children are mentally harmed. I really truly believe that the public school system does a lot of mental harm. If you look at it, the public school system, they mentally manipulate children. A lot of people can argue that, well, so do parents. But when they get force-fed a lot of information at such a young age that they shouldn't know anything about, shouldn't even be on their mind, shouldn't ever be in their discussion at some of these ages, you have to wonder what is going on here. And, well, maybe you agree with it. Maybe, oh, yeah, I like the sex ed in 3rd grade. Well, that's your choice. But a lot of these kids are not really being given a choice. The parents aren't being given the choice. Health class. Go to health class all the time. Well, our health class involves sex ed. And it seems to be a mandatory thing. And, well, by the way, it's from Planned Parenthood. Well, if you don't have any problem, okay. But what about the Catholic family? What about the kid that might not want to be told about this procedure and finds it grotesque? These are things that should be left up to parents, but of course they think you as a parent might not be competent enough to teach your kids about sex. Forget the fact that you produce the child yourself. Let's forget that you produce a child yourself because, well, you're not competent to teach your kid about sex. So we'll do it in the schools. And with this Common Core, they're trying to, I really think that they're trying to make parents look dumb. Because if you look at the Common Core, it's not that you can't get the answer. It's that it's written in a language that never existed before when it comes to learning math. And it kind of bypasses any real thought. Let's say you had five jelly beans, and you want to know how many there are if you take away 3. Well, to get the answer, they might want you to write it out as 5 minus 1 equals 4, minus 2 equals 2, plus 1 minus 1 equals 2. And you're like, what? That makes no sense. This is how they're writing it. They'll teach the kids in class. That's how they want them to write it out. But you'll get the little worksheet from your kids and you'll tell them how to do it one way, and it'll be wrong. And people have been finding this out. That's why I'm an advocate for homeschooling. If you have the ability to homeschool, you should be homeschooled. Now, not everybody has that ability. Not everybody can go out there and homeschool. And I think more liberty, freedom-oriented schools really need to pop up. I think there needs to be a grassroots movement for some type of liberty-type schooling. And what I mean by that is not making a private school or a charter school. I'm talking about something this country used to have. Little schoolhouses. Where it's in your local community. You don't have people being bussed in from 10, 20 miles away. Communities need to really start serving themselves, because that's what we've gone away from. Just because we have the ability to talk to people across the world, just because we have the ability to travel at speeds that we in history have not been able to be able to drive from Indiana down to Florida in a day. What would have took weeks. Does not mean that we have to spend our money there all the time. And you're like, I don't. I spend it at Walmart. You're spending your money somewhere else. Well, my kids go to a local public school that's paid by tax dollars. And, well, it might be a tax dollars if your school gets enough funding. You might be getting some of that money back through your school system. But then you also have other people's money mixed in. That means people in other communities are now getting to make decisions, because it's federally funded, on what your children should be learning. That's where the problem with things like the, government's education, it takes your ability to be effective in your local schools because they're funded federally. So you have people making those type of decisions. Well, the schools get to pick, they get to pick what textbook goes along with the standards. Well, you know, Indiana, they got rid of No, they didn't. They changed the name. Changed a little bit of the wording to try to convince people it's different. Indiana's still using Common Core books. They're fooling people. We'll change the name. We have to have some type of standards. What are standards to them? Is it your ability to be able to do math, write, speak? What else is there when it comes to standards? By saying, well, we're going to manipulate how we want them to write it out. We want them to do exactly how we tell them. And even though writing it another way might give you the same result, because it's not our way, it will be wrong. When I said mental manipulation earlier, that's where it's played. It's not about getting the right answer and doing it in a way that makes sense and being awarded for that. No, it's about doing it how you're told. And then, of course, the free thinkers are always punished in public school systems. There's a very, very simple rule. Sit down, shut up, and obey. That's the rule that is enforced. Not do what's right or wrong. Not use common sense. But sit down, shut up, obey. Our way is the right way, any other way is wrong. That's not teaching knowledge. That's not educating. That's not a child learning. That the way you want is the only way. It's that we need a solution to a problem. And we need you to be able to do that. 2 plus 2. The answer is 4. We need you to figure out how to do it. But oh no, if they write down 5 and somehow they can justify adding 2 and 2 and equal 5, even if their justification makes absolutely no sense, they'll tell them that's right. When education is so construed to the point that it's actually the opposite. It's de-education. You know society is on the wrong path. It's time that we stand up and do something about it. And that starts with you. Change yourself and change everyone around you. Stay tuned here to UCY.TV. Also broadcast. Tune in.